So we will just begin, and if
I
you're
have
late, we'll
to,
try to fill you in.
I have to name that I have to leave an hour in to facilitate the town hall.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thanks for letting us know. So we're going to zoom through a lot of content in today's session and also have time for some participatory exercises, and we're going to talk about what to expect from this training, how it will kind of flow, and assignments, which are usually very fun. So first off, just a welcome from Lisa and I. We'll just give you a little bit of an overview of who we are before we find out a bit more about who you are, and yeah, just a bit about the flow. So my name is Kate Beecroft. I'm part of a company called Greater Than, which is what we call a venture inside Inspiral, which is a community of practice of participatory practices around decision making. We've been operating for about 7 years and kind of prototyping a lot of approaches to new ways of working. Everything from ecosystem agreements to practices and how we care for each other in this context, to starting. So that's a lot of the things that happen at the ecosystem level, and as well as that, we start a lot of small businesses dealing with the problems of how to participate and make decisions together in the so-called new world of work. One of those tools that you may have heard of is called Lumio, which is a collaborative decision-making software. And there's various others. There may be some people coming on from Inspiral as the weeks go by as guests. So if you're interested in learning more, we can share info with you before that. We have a handbook which is very explanatory about all of our systems and processes for how we self-organize as a community of about 100 people. So pretty small in the scheme of things, but the approach is very much experimentation, copy, share, learn. So that's kind of where I bring my practice from. I'm Greater Than has a software tool called Co-Budget, which is collaborative budgeting and funding for organizations. And Lisa Gill, who is a very esteemed colleague of mine, we started working together a couple of years ago, coaching a software company in Barcelona to transition to become self-managing. And Lisa, tell me a bit more about you, please.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Lisa. I'm from the UK, but I'm also based here in Barcelona. I have been working for the last few years with a Swedish company called Tough Leadership Training, which is a self-managing training consultancy company. And we work with organizations that are interested in being more self-managing, and specifically where we help with is the kind of leadership piece, like what does leadership look like in a self-managing organization, and who we're being and mindset and that kind of stuff, the more human skills and team communication side of self-management. And I also have my own company, Reimaginaire, and I collaborate with people like Kate and Inspiral and lots of different kind of networks and groups like that, which is really fun. I also write a lot, so you'll see a few of my blogs and things in some of the readings for the course over the next few weeks. And I'm in the process of writing a book about self-managing organizations, and some stories of transformations, some failures and successes and things like that. And I also have a podcast called Leadermorphosis, which is super fun because I get to interview really cool people from around the world who are authors, speakers, practitioners, people inside companies, in the education system, all over the place, that are sort of grappling with these ways of working. And my mission, I guess, is to share practices and examples and stories so that people can be more emboldened to experiment with these ways of working in their own contexts and organizations. So it's really awesome to be working with you guys in Consensus, and looking forward to getting to know you guys a bit better and seeing how this course and cohort unfolds.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And just to point out, Lisa is like a treasure trove of amazing resources. So if you're like, I want to prove the business application of self-organizing, Lisa will be like, right, I have an article about that. So, and a lot of academic articles too, which is very, very helpful and valuable. Okay, so just to give a little bit of framing, and we're going to go much deeper into kind of our approach, our kind of how we've shaped this course and what it's based on, and a little bit after we check in, but just some really cursory information. Our kind of approach to self-organization is that there's no one size fits all, especially in an environment like consensus, with the amount of change and the amount of diversity and divergence, and the difference in kind of teams, spokes, hubs, and what you're trying to achieve. So we kind of really differ from models like holacracy or sociocracy, which is very much like a process that you follow to get to an objective. Susan Basterfield, who I worked with to design a training called Practical Self-Management, which runs, it's open to the public, and it runs, so we have 15 people from completely different organizations come in and participate in this program. And often we'll go do a bit of consulting with their organizations afterwards. And it's very, our premise is that the organization every organization and every team has an extremely different context. And there's actually there's a lot of variance in what self-organization is and how it can be applied. So we don't advocate and follow these rules or this methodology or this framework. We really advocate people co-creating the thing that works for them and using the collective intelligence in the team and the amazing experience of everyone to kind of figure out your own framework and approach. So just a little bit on logistics for this course. So Mondays, today we don't have a guest joining us because we really want to make time to get to know you and dive into some of the problems or sorry, Lisa does not like that word, the challenges and the opportunities that you're holding around self-organization and self-management, and make sure we have enough time to jump into teams, because you're going to work in teams for the remainder of this training and start to prototype some agreements in those teams. So on Mondays, we will have time in teams. We will go through some content. We will do a participatory exercise. And next week, for instance, we will have a guest speaker. So we often invite some of our colleagues and friends who are kind of world leaders or experts in self-management. For instance, last time we had Doug Kirkpatrick, one of the founders of Morningstar, which is an amazing, totally self-organizing company based in California. Tomato processing, totally self-organizing. We have people like Samantha Slade, so you might not know all the names, but just amazing leaders who have really been working on this stuff for many, many years. And they come on and we get to ask them questions, and their kind of invitation is related to the content that we're covering in that particular week. So we'll share who the guests are shortly. Particularly something to look forward to is decision-making week, which I'll talk about then soon, and the guests that we'll have along then. So yeah, on Fridays, it's just an hour. It's super short. It's kind of quite energizing, and that's the time that we take to share back the work that we've done in our teams and also on our individual assignments. So let's jump from there unless there's any logistical questions into a check-in, just knowing that we're going to circle back to a bit more theory and content and dig into our approach in about 20 minutes. Any logistical questions or things that aren't making sense so far? No, we don't know what we don't know. So great. Let's jump to the slides, Lisa, and start with the check-in. Can I just see a slide? I'll just zoom along and see a slide, a show of hands for who's familiar with this practice of checking in. Anyone using that regularly? Claudel, Alexander, Trace? Cool. Well, I'll give Ashoka, my definition of what it is and why it's fundamentally one of the most important, would you say tools? Yeah, tools that you can use in a self-organizing team, even though it's very simple. It's just the practice of whenever you come together in a meeting or as a group to really make the time to allow people to speak about. It could be anything. Often we have a check-in question, but once you start using this practice again and again and again, you can just say, let's check in. And so it's very essential that when checking in, no, you don't comment or ask questions based on what anyone else says, unless you really misheard. So it's not a time to drill into, okay, Trace has said this comment about this bit of work that he's doing. Now is the time to dig in and get more information. Not at all. It is a time to arrive and say what you need to say, to be fully present, and to start this process of taking off the mask and like really coming with who you are. It can sound a bit woo-woo, the thought of introducing this kind of concept into, a team of, let's say, introverted, some introverts or some developers, and asking them, okay, now we're going to do this process where we ask you to talk about how you're feeling in this particular time and moment. But little by little, you can start quite small and start quite safe with the question. And over time, people kind of build up their muscles where you can actually, I recall a meeting that we had the other day with my team where we'd been running all day from meeting to meeting, and we had to like totally shift context and shift approach in order to have a meeting about equity and company structure. And it was kind of like, we did a check-in, and that check-in surfaced so much that it took us 10 minutes. From there, we were able to restabilize and actually have a very, very kind of human-centered, real conversation about our equity position in our company. And I think if we'd just rushed through the day and not checked in, we would have brought so much of like the stress and the other stuff into that meeting. So a check-in can be like a kind of a breathing point as well. Anything to add there, Lisa, or indeed any of the other people who are used to this practice? No? Okay, cool. We'll move on to checking in because we are really curious to start learning about who you are. So next slide, please, Lisa. Yes. So we're just asking you for your name, just to restate it again, the team or the hub or the spoke that you're operating in. We want to ask, what does self-organization mean to you? And there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's just what's coming up. Everything is fine. And what is your intention for this training? And that could be one word, or it could be a short sentence. So we've got a bit of time, I would say 20 minutes to do this. So we're not in a rush, but also just realizing that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, I think, is it, on the call, 10 including me and Lisa. So just allowing to not, talk for 5 minutes. Lisa, could I ask you to start?
Yeah, sure. So my name you already know already. Self-organization, what it means to me, I think, is back when I was working in the corporate world, in companies and stuff, it always bothered me when people didn't have a voice, when people weren't included in decisions that affected them. I think I became a bit of a rebel and was someone that was really upset by injustices like that. And to me, it didn't make sense to exclude people who had, frontline knowledge, who had valuable creativity and intelligence to include. So I think now, years later, as a facilitator helping teams being self-managing, I really value giving people the opportunity to have a voice and to tap into the collective intelligence and creativity of a group, because I don't think we really have the tools to do that. We haven't learned that. We've had like 150 years of this paradigm of organizations of top-down, hierarchical command and control. So self-organization to me is something about like liberating the potential in a group of people, in individuals, bringing out the best in people. And my intention for this training is, there's no one size fits all. So for me, it's so interesting to hear different insights and thoughts and questions and challenges about self-organization. So I'm just really my intention is just to be really open and curious and to learn from all of you. Yeah, I'll stop there. Do you want me to pass it on to someone, Kate, or is someone going to just...
If it's possible, can we put those check-in questions into the chat and then like have the view, and then we'll just do popcorn style.
Yeah. Ooh.
Which is so if you just stop sharing your screen, Lisa.
Yeah.
So popcorn style is just when you're ready to like pop, you just go, instead of us kind of passing the baton. So does anyone want to pop to answer the check-in question, which we'll be putting into?
I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Hey guys, Claudia here. The team, perfect, yeah, in the chat. The team, as I said, Tara will be a spoke, I hope, by the end of the week. For me, self-organization, the best word that I have in mind is a murmuration. Murmuration, I don't know if it's a word in English, but it's like flocks of birds moving on their own. And for me, it's always been fascinating because there's no leader or no bird having a cap and asking everyone to go left and right. So that's for me what it means. And why I'm willing to, what I'm hoping at least to get out of this training and exercise for the next coming weeks is, I think at some level, a bit close to what Lisa did. I've been lucky to live and grow up in different places in Africa, Europe, South America. And I think I come to I don't know if it's the understanding or the belief that we've always been organizing ourselves on our own pyramid. So there needs to be a boss, someone leading. I've been to business school in the US, and of course I had that training of how to be a good manager. So of course, how do you delegate, how do you do that? And a couple of years ago, I've been challenged and tried to challenge myself of what exactly would it mean if you're not a manager, so something is not on you, what does that mean as a team to work towards a common goal? So yeah, I think personally, and I think for my team or my family, hopefully soon, it will be interesting. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Claudel, and welcome. Who's popping next?
I can go next. So my name is Dunia. I work as a community lead here in Paris for France. My job is basically to increase the visibility of content France here. For me, self-organization is a way to organize for a company, depending on human, depending on decentralized decisions and actions. So human is on the center of all the organization. And what I'm just waiting for this learning is, first of all, get to know how we can improve in terms of working ways in a decentralized organization. It's my first company like that, so it's really important for me to get a good overview on it and feel good at the end of the day and say, okay, this is what I consider good to produce and to deliver, and at the end of the day, at the end of the week, be okay and be happy with that. So I think this type of training can help me get some good insight and good tips regarding these points. The second point is to get a clear vision on the benefits, the pros and cons, and the limits of this type of organization. Because I would like for Consensus to increase our brand through this DNA, through this self-organization as well. And a third point, I'm working on an event here in France to show how self-organization and decentralized organization can empower people. So yeah, very curious about it.
Okay, thank you. And I'm also, the third question, which I won't ask you to go back to anyone that hasn't stated it, which is, what is your intention? And who do we have popping next? Go ahead, Alexander.
Hey, I'm Alexander from Toronto Solutions. So what self-organization means to me, I think I liked a lot of punk music when I was a kid, so I didn't really like authority. I don't really like the top-down pyramid of things. So for me, it's like a great way to have everyone on a level playing field and have my voice in the company on what's being built, and also like support the voices in my group that I believe are right and might not have as big a say in things. Well, obviously will in the situation. My intention for this training, which I wrote down, just let me find it. I really liked in Lisa's vlog the me and we skills, because I feel like they're like a good range of skills for life in general. And I'd like to especially learn a lot of things around how to be authentic and also transforming conflict, because I've found it to be a bit chaotic in every company I've ever been in.
Great, thank you. Who have we got coming up? Go ahead, Kiba, and then we'll go to Amanda.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kiba. I'm on the branding team, which is inside the Catalyst. And for me, what does self-organization mean? I really think it's more of like an environment or a context rather than like a specific activity that one person does or a group of people do. And I guess that's really because I became interested in self-organization through kind of like complex systems and more of like the math side of things. So it's not really like a human condition for me initially. So pretty excited for that. And then I guess my intentions with this training is just having a better understanding of what self-organization is in this new context of like how humans interact with each other. And also just to bring things back to my team. I think my team doesn't really understand consensus yet, which has been interesting, kind of interacting with like my team and then also like more of the traditional consensus people like Ashoka. And so I'm kind of interested to see how I can bridge that gap mostly.
Very nice. Thank you, Kiba. Amanda.
Okay, so I am Amanda Strader. I am currently in the solutions team as a general support role member here, but I am in the middle of transitioning over towards a new role in which I'll be facilitating logistics for all internal events, meaning if they need offsites or retreats or things like that to help put some structure and some support for groups that need insurance and hotels and whatnot. So that's part of the intention. I'm going to jump to number 3. The intention of this training is to learn how to offer support mesh-wide in a way that it's not, like I did Dublin, for those of you who went to Dublin with solutions. I didn't make decisions, but I facilitated a lot of conversations that led to decisions. And it was a lengthier process, so I was trying to find a better way to figure out like the decision-making tools and whatnot we can be implying, just other applications for topics that come up here. And I guess to me, self-organization comes from my history as an educational teacher. I was a K-12 music teacher as well as a high school math and English teacher. And one of the things I taught all of my high school students was self-management. And your college professor doesn't care if you're not there. Your parents are not going to be taking attendance, and trying to build accountability into self-organization and self-management. And so to me, self-organization comes from an internal drive of personal accountability. And I'd love to see how that applies, again, to different teams and various connections, and how I can help with that or learn from that.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Itam.
Hi, my name is Eitan. I'm based out of Boston, and I'm part of the Customer Success Circle. We basically intend to be a cross-organization. And I know Amanda well from here, and I can I can be a witness. She can be a guru of how to be a self-organization. She did an outstanding job for this for the Dublin event, and in the meantime, trying to was very helpful to me coming up with our own event, which was days just before the we decided to go to Dublin. So just as a comment side. What am I trying to get? So what does it self-organization mean to me? For me, it's discipline, and it's about the ability to take ownership. I come from an organization which is very structured, where people know there is a manager. So at the end of the day, he will be in charge he will take responsibility. And I'm trying to find a way and implement that everybody will have their ownership. And I think self-discipline is a key here. My intention here, since we are kind of unique, we're going to become a 24/7 organization, working on multi-content, supporting customers all over. I'm trying to learn how to let it go and how we are able to manage this with people all over the place without controlling everyone at the same time.
What a great challenge. Thank you for joining us. Still got a couple to go.
I'm ready to go. Cool. So I'm Samsul. I'm based out of Dubai. So I work in the education or in the education circle within the Dubai Solutions Circle, leading delivery for a project as well as a number of other education-related initiatives and some business development pursuits. So self-organization to me, I think it's, I would define it as a team of volunteers that have a shared common goal and self-organize to define and self-select roles for team members towards achieving that goal in an efficient manner. What's my intention for this training? So we're growing in Dubai as fast as everywhere else, and Consensus is growing. So I think part of it is around how we better organize ourselves towards achieving more efficiently. Yeah, I think we're doing a pretty good job, but I think we could do much better. And as we grow more rapidly, it's going to be even more important.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Samsul. We've still got Eva. Eva, would you like to go?
Yeah. Hi. I've been a floater at Consensus for a few years. I've never wanted to join any circle or spoke, but I've recently been forced to. Hopefully it's temporary. Sorry, I'm also on the compensation working group. So self-organizing to me means that I, in conversation with others, can decide best how I can contribute and how we can do our best work together. And that shouldn't come from outside of the people doing the work. My intention for this training is that I'm curious as to how Consensus, which hasn't always been self-organizing and has many different groups with legacy or hierarchical structures, and how those groups can interact with smaller groups that want to be self-organizing, and how that evolves, and the inherent tensions, if in all of that, also as it relates to compensation stuff. But
yeah, let's dig into those inherent tensions. Thank you, Eva. We've got still Trace and Ashoka. Go ahead, Trace.
Sure. So I'm Trace Wax. I'm based in New York and also spending increasing amounts of time in Seattle, Washington, to work on a project called Kuiper, otherwise sometimes known as the Space Spoke. We want to facilitate ambitious efforts on Earth, to do ambitious things in space. And we want these to emerge and succeed, understand how this can work on a very large scale by showing how it can work many times on many small scales. So what that means to me is encouraging everyone to bring their best selves to work and outside of work, family, personal life, and their efforts, to have a felt sense of what's needed and what you want and can contribute, so you can make the contribution with the most impact. And that has meaning for me as well. I feel it's an important alternative to the much more authoritarian forms of governance that have existed and new ones that are gaining strength. And we want to show that this works, for us as individuals. This works for a company, because if it fails, then we'll be stuck with what we had and what could come that could be much worse. So I feel like it's really important. And my intention for the training is just to understand what I need so that I can be successful in this environment, and show that just for myself, so I feel like I'm carrying my weight and then some, and supporting my team and understanding how the team could succeed. My colleagues haven't been able to free up the time to do this yet, so I have to take these ideas and share them with my team, and then to the company as a whole, so we can succeed, show that this works, and that it is freeing. Show all the haters that this isn't just shadow, puppet Trotskyism, and that show by our success that others can do this too.
Yeah, Nice, thanks. I think we're making a new isms. Well, hopefully. Ashoka, we haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm Ashoka. I work primarily on Distribute, which is a DAO to fund projects and communities, and Circles, which is a UBI project that is prototyping in Berlin. Self-organization means, to me, I think, I'll be less backlit so people can see my face rather than being in the darkness as I usually am. I think self-organizing means to me like non-coercion. I think for me, like it is the deepest and most organized form of, I think, what I would call anarchism. I think the relationships of power between humans is something that's really hard for us to understand and change. I think that our histories of hierarchies are incredibly violent and traumatic, no matter who you are and where you're from. And that trauma infects kind of our relationships with each other with different biases and stories and narratives that create and promote cycles of harm. And so I think that the notion that we don't know the skills to be self-organized is directly because of that, because a lot of the people who have tried to be self-organized historically have been murdered, like, which is, and so what does that effect have on our perceptions of our abilities to work together is something that I'm really interested in this context. And so I'm interested to know, in the context of this training, is that if processes or tools necessarily can lead to self-organization, if those biases around power and the realities of and demands of capital in our organization and implicit hierarchies and ways that hierarchy is really already present, and the modality by which we organize ourselves, if we can actually be self-organized. So I think for me, this is kind of like a meta experience, but I'm interested in participating for sure.
Fantastic, thank you. I'll also very quickly check in, and we did very well with the time, by the way. We self-organized there. Just to finish off, yeah, I'm Kate. I'm working with the this training actually runs with the DNA as part of the DNA team, as part of the way that they're trying to help the mesh and people in the mesh learn more about self-organization and take it to their teams. And yeah, for me, it's actually like a way of living life where it's a very important balance between autonomy and community. So for me, self-organization is fundamentally about the self and how we like deal with the trauma of being a human being and many of the ways that we've learned trauma or experienced that, and working on that in community and in the workplace. So I've been really fortunate to experience it and hopefully like grow and develop very much as a human while being able to do the thing that feels totally in line with my theory of change and do the work that I love and grow as a human. And I'll stop there. And my intention, for this course is to stand in my integrity, basically, which is something I've been calling in a lot these last kind of 6 months to not go outside and start making any claims, and just to draw on practical personal experience and call in other experts and your voices too where necessary. So thank you all for that really elucidating check-in. It was super interesting. And I think that we can really clearly see the divergence and the divergence and differing opinion in what self-organization is already. And I think that's very valid because it is, and we're going to jump into this a little bit now, but this is kind of a new field or a new approach, even though it has been around for a few years. I still think that you all, and we are kind of the early adopters, and we are making the definitions as we go. And so it's super important that we are reflecting on what our assumptions are, and also the diversity, the divergence of what other people think self-organization is, especially as an organization. Consensus tries to map out the self-organization journey for various individuals. So I just thought that was so interesting that for some people we heard, self-organization is very much about accountability, responsibility, being internally self-derived, basically, knowing how to deliver, knowing how to manage yourself, and then all the way out to, the rejection of hierarchy as a form of extreme violence and oppression and trauma, and what to do about that. So we've got a lot to play with, which is great. And Lisa, let's jump back into the slides and we can kind of talk you through how we are seeing it in the context of this training and how we will talk about tools, practices, frameworks. So Lisa, do you want to start with this and hand over to me as necessary?
Yeah. Do you want me to say a bit about self-organization and stuff like that, and then later on we'll talk about the overview of the course? Is that your thinking?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So yeah, as Kate says, there's and as we kind of was demonstrated there are lots of different concepts and definitions and terms when it comes to this way of working, and lots of different practices and principles that we are going to be drawing on. But we're going to kind of work with this definition and the definition that you saw in the SO101 blog as well in the reading, which is self-organization as the radical decentralization of authority throughout an organization. So it doesn't necessarily mean bossless or hierarchy-less, non-hierarchical, but a kind of intentional decentralization of authority. And something else that I can say about kind of different approaches to transformation in this direction is that there are kind of two trends going on out there in the world. There's like structure and processes and doing. And then there's another angle, which is sort of leadership, mindset, culture, which is more like the being, kind of human skill side of things. And so traditional companies obviously sit in this space of traditional structures, hierarchical structures, quite bureaucratic. And in terms of leadership, they're kind of thinking about leadership, and their approach to leadership is fairly traditional as well. But then you have organizations that are more that are traditionally structured, you could say. So they have hierarchies and things like that. But they are pursuing and investigating and exploring a kind of leadership, a kind of culture, a kind of being that is more collaborative. So maybe they're making decisions in a more involving way. Maybe leadership is more coaching in its style, but there's still a clear sort of structure and clear kind of roles and authority marked out. And then there are companies that sit in this kind of top left-hand corner that are companies often in the tech space, startups or smaller organizations that are rejecting traditional structures or are kind of necessarily, because of the technology they're using, decentralized in terms of what they're doing and how they're structured. But there's something I find in my experience missing in terms of what does leadership look like in these kinds of companies. So we know we don't want to be hierarchical in our structure, but then what does that mean in terms of leadership? How do I be a leader? How do we co-lead together? As Ashoka said, like, we haven't really learned those new ways of being together because, well, for lots of different reasons, as he started to mention there. So there are companies in this kind of fourth quadrant, vanguard companies, that are exploring both, that are both decentralized in terms of their structure, and they're also doing different things in terms of leadership and mindset and culture. And an example of that would be a company like Buurtzorg, the Dutch neighborhood nursing company with 15,000 people. They work in self-managing teams of 12. They have a headquarters of just 50 kind of staff, and they use IT to decentralize everything, and they have coaches that support teams, and they have a kind of view of leadership and teamwork and collaboration that's a lot about feedback. It's a lot about conflict transformation, and Jos de Blok, the founder, doesn't coerce anyone. He doesn't push anything top down. It's all very collaborative. Kate, do you want to add anything at this point?
No, I think what I want to add is, if any of you read the blog, the SO101 blog, that kind of puts forward this theory that we're playing with when in regards to consensus, that there's the self, there's the team, and then there's the mesh or the ecosystem, and that's how we kind of practice self-organization in our various communities as well. So you can't say that we will solve all of the problems, in my mind, at the team level only, with processes, with tools, with frameworks. You can't necessarily solve all of the problems at the ecosystem level too, with ecosystem agreements, without starting with the self. So the self in self-management, which is around personal practice, personal development, becoming aware of how you're triggered, becoming aware of the barriers that or the trauma, basically, a lot of it is related to trauma, that you're bringing forward and how you're showing up. So the ecosystem approach is the self, the team, and the mesh or the ecosystem as well. And so in SO101, we are trying to work in regards to all those three levels. We can jump now into the overview, Lisa, so that we can show how that's going to play out, which is a little bit throughout each week, where we will be asking you to do some kind of individual assignment where we do delve into that kind of personal development process. And there's a lot of research in this, and we're drawing out some tools which educational psychologists and like Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy and many of these amazing kind of development theorists have been using to help people think about how to develop. And that is a really important part. And week 5, we're going to spend a lot of time really delving into some of the work that we've realized we have to do as individuals. Because, so that SO101 blog really kind of names that. There is no escaping the work that we need to do to be autonomous and to be working in amazing self-managing teams. But starting with in week 1, here and now, we will be also looking at accountability and commitments to each other. In a self-organizing team, no one is forcing you to do anything. Therefore, how do you align to produce something amazing? If you could just go back. I'll just talk through it briefly first, Lisa, and then we can jump into that. Week 2, we spend a lot of time looking at communication and relationships. We're going to have an amazing guest joining us to talk about kind of a little bit of where conflict kind of comes from, and looking at listening and different forms of communication and how that can impact our teams. Week 3, we'll jump into 9 types of decision making. One of them being collaborative, but they're kind of there are 9 amazing kind of ways of making decisions that kind of move beyond, or 8, command and control. So we'll spend a bit of time playing with that, and we will have a guest speaker coming on, an expert in collaborative or new ways of decision making. Week 4 is about prototyping, so it's actually about action. And week 5, the self. So maybe we can move slides, Lisa, and just look into where this is coming from. So the problems that we're solving are some of the things that have been coming out in your check-ins, we hope. And we've kind of structured the process so that we do end up in week 4, where we ask you and your teams to make a prototype that will be used by other people in the mesh. And we can share the deck with you. And in a minute, I'll just show you one of the prototypes that a team from the previous cohort made, which hopefully we haven't quite had time to think about how we'll integrate it. But basically, there's a couple of people who have made like a kind of a homepage for how self-organization can flourish and function in the mesh. I've just put the link in the chat. So that's a bit of an indication of what people are prototyping as they come through this training, which the kind of thesis here is, the idea here is we really want this to be practical, and for you all to be kind of like working on bits of self-organization that will be valuable and add to this journey that consensus people in the mesh are on, and actually usable by people. And then we'll dive from there back into the self and self-organization. How can I own my development, and how can I show up in my team? And we'll be doing little bits of this throughout, and week 5 is the opportunity we're going to have an amazing guest and really get down to the level, if you're willing. Anything to add there, Lisa?
I guess I could. Do you want to talk about a bit about this, the onion thing?
Yes, please.
Should I talk about it, or do you want to?
I mean, I would like, if you want to add anything to how I've explained the weeks. Otherwise, no, let's start off on the onion and I can take over if necessary.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add on this. I think it's good. So the onion, we're very proud of our onion. So this is like sort of a way of, some of you might have seen it. It's like, it comes from the agile world, but it's sort of reversed, because it kind of illustrates the framework behind the design of the SO101 course, which is starting that everything, at the core of everything we do is this mindset and way of being piece. So we'll be kind of embodying and living all of the things that we're talking about over the next few weeks, everything from like the check-in and the different conversations we're having and the tools and so on are all kind of premised on this, trying to get into the mindset of a kind of adult to adult personal leadership way of being that's so kind of crucial to working in self-organized teams. And then kind of one level up from that are principles. So you can kind of come at self-organization from a level of principles. And some of the ones that we'll look at are things like transparency, experimentation, and stuff like that. And then there are practices. So we did one at the start of the call. We did a check-in, and we'll be introducing lots of little micro practices and practices along the way that you can kind of introduce in the mesh in your calls and your meetings as like little habits and rituals that kind of build culture piece by piece. And then we'll also look at tools and processes, like how we do things. So Kate's already mentioned Lumio, a decision-making tool that came out of Inspiral, and Co-Budget she also mentioned. Trello would be another example. So those are the sort of different dimensions that we'll be dipping in and out of across the course. Anything to add, Kate?
No, I think that's great. I mean, tools and processes, often people turn up to workshops and trainings and they say, I want to walk away with tools and processes to change how to start doing self-organization. And I think that's a totally legitimate demand, because we often find humans reaching for like, okay, once I implement the process, then the outcome will be achieved. But often we find that there's all sorts of human behaviors and ways of being that interfere with our need for process and tools. So they are really important, and we'll be diving into a lot of them, more than just, apps, but also like, frameworks for decision making, or like how you open source and make transparent all of your decisions that you've ever had, or anything like that. They will be there, but they're not the only thing. So that's just a little bit of a look into how like our kind of framework for considering people's learning journey. And I just want to make time for a few quick questions before we jump into the 124 all, Lisa. And I think we're about 5 minutes behind, but it's all as well. Do you want to stop sharing your screen just so I can see people's faces? Any questions so far?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Specifically, love the onion slide, by the way, really well done. Just to clarify that, contrary to a normal onion, we're going from the way of feeling all the way up, not the other way around, right? That's good. Thank you.
Great question. And yeah, simple answer. Anything else? Any question on anything we've said so far before we move along? Okay, seems like we're making sense. Cool. So we'll do kind of a onion love. We'll do a little process so that you can start talking to each other and stop listening to us, which is called a 124 all. And this is from a set of practices called liberating structures, which is the best. It's so cool. Lisa and I are pretty obsessed with them. They're at about 30. There's a little menu. We can drop the URL in the chat. It's basically ways to get people participating and bringing forward their voices more in a group, rather than just going around the circle and asking people to do a check-in style. The liberating structures, there's so many ways that we can like bring in rich conversation and like use different lenses and approaches to harvest a different kind of dialogue. So 124 all is a super simple one for that, and we use it all the time. And I would really heavily advise using it, experimenting this in your next meeting that you have, just to see what changes, especially on Zoom. It works well too. So Lisa, if you just want to talk us through the question or the process with the slide.
Yeah, let me get the slide up. Where's it gone? There it is. Where is it? Oh no, I've lost my window.
It's so weird. Doesn't matter. We can just talk through it.
Yeah, I'll just talk through it. So 1, 2, 4 all. The premise is in the name. So we're going to spend 1 minute silently and individually reflecting on a question, which I'll share with you in a moment and put in the chat. And then I'm going to put you into breakout rooms in pairs. And then I want you to share with each other what you reflected on with that question. And so you'll have 2 minutes for that. And then I'm going to drag you into kind of converge your breakout room so that you end up with roughly a group of 4. We've got slightly odd numbers, so you might get split up from your pair into another breakout room. But the premise is that you have then 4 minutes in your 4 to share the same question. And then we come back as a whole group and we just spend sort of 5 or so minutes kind of picking popcorn style, just some highlights. So it's not like a round or anything, but just like capturing some of the highlights of the conversations. So
yeah, and I think just one thing to add, in when you're in 4s, just looking for the patterns, any synthesis or like overlap or repetition that you may notice, so that you can feed back to the group on something that's particularly has occurred a few times. So do listen for patterns in your 4s.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So the question is, what are the main challenges that you're facing in your work? So within the mesh, in the work that you're doing, what are the main sort of challenges, the sticky, tricky things that you're facing at the moment? So I'm going to give you 1 minute, and then you'll get a pop-up message on your screen to go into your breakout room. Okay, so 1 minute starting now.
And you can put your video off for this bit if you really don't want to be in the group.
Okay, so that's a minute. I'm opening the breakout room, so join when you're ready, and you have about 2 minutes. Okay, everyone's back now. So yeah, so let's hear, so I'll time box this for 5 minutes, and let's hear just one key takeaway from each breakout group from one person. So who wants to start us off in breakout room 1? So Dunia or Alexander?
Yes, well, on my side, the takeover will be regarding a point through schizophrenia, because in consensus you are part of several circles, and so each circle has their own OKR, and as a community lead, it's really important for me to align all the interests of everybody. And at the end of the day, I'm afraid about this schizophrenia thing and just being crazy. Align all these objectives and the directions. So I will say that yes, if I have to choose one, this is one.
Great, thank you. Anything to add, Alexander?
Yeah, I think one of the key takeaways I got from the 2 conversations was accountability, whether it's personal or with people that you're working with, is something that we really are all trying to manage together and trying to learn how to help to make sure other people are accountable for the things you need.
Yeah, accountability is definitely a challenge in self-organization. Well, in general, I guess. Thank you. Breakout room 2. So Amanda, Kiba, Trace, who wants to share a takeaway from your conversations?
I'll do that. So it's how to organize specific actions from vague objectives when direction and feedback are lacking. And that showed up in different ways, from starting something new and breaking something large down to some of its parts, to contributing to an effort without guidance but without a feedback cycle, and choosing your own things that you think are useful but nobody's really letting you know or what to do better next time, to understanding like from some vague objectives we have these touchy-feely awesome goals, and we want to do them, and you can't put a price tag on that, but legal and finance needs to know. And as we like to say in the space biz, no bucks, no Buck Rogers.
Great, thank you, Trace. Anything to add from breakout room 2 before we move on? No? Okay, breakout room 3. So we had ITAM, is it ITAM? Am I saying that right?
It's
Eva, ATAM, sorry. ATAM, Eva, Samsul, and Claudel. So who wants to share a takeaway from breakout room 3?
One was that as soon as this organization starts to talk about real money, the transparency starts to shut down. Another was teams being accountable for each other's performance and sharing the accountability better.
Great, thanks, guys. Any final thoughts on 1, 2, 4 all and that question?
Yeah, I feel like from my point of view, there's at least within the mesh, there's still no clear limits of what can be handled as a company-wide policy versus a circle or team-wise policy. So you might want to self-organize within a team, but you just don't know if the decision you can make within a team is going to be contradictory to the overall policy, because sometimes that overall policy doesn't exist and you don't know exactly how it is made. So there's always that self between. So we're all part of a big bubble. We are small circles inside a big bubble, but where are we moving? It's not extremely clear. And the demarcation of where do we stop into the decisions or how we function is not clear at all.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, it's a good point. And I mean, it is a work in progress in some ways. And I do want to just, for 2 minutes, understand what you all mean when you say accountability, because it's coming up a lot, which is very, it's good because we're going to talk about social contracts and agreements. But before we do that, what is accountability to you? There's just maybe a couple people that haven't contributed so much already, whose voices we haven't heard. What is accountability? What does it mean? Maybe Samsul or Eva or Amanda?
Yeah, so I can go.
Mm-hmm.
So I think accountability is in a self-organizing team context, or generally in a team context, is doing what you committed to saying, or doing what you committed to doing within the time frame that you committed to doing that. So it's like within a team, everybody makes certain commitments, or we self-organize into certain roles, which assumes that that role will do certain actions or do specific things within a specific time frame. So accountability really for me in that context is sticking to your word. Like things can happen. It's like there's a lot of stuff going on, but I think being clear in terms of what you're going to be delivering as part of that team, even if there might be some delay for whatever reason, I think that's what accountability means to me.
Okay, great. Cool. So I definitely am hearing this word from a lot of people as we talk to a lot of people in the mesh. And it is really interesting that I think it's being used as kind of like the symbol for a lot of like in that I also heard personal responsibility, which is accountability is kind of to be held to account in some ways as well. So what's the process there? And this is really, it's good timing, because now we're going to move into a bit of content on basically accountability and commitments. So taking from personal responsibility to say that you're going to do a thing in a constellation of people, which is often a team, and how do we like move from like saying, yes, I will do this thing, to actually delivering in a way that's transparent, in a way that like you feel good about, in a way that your team feels good about. And one of the fundamental tools that are used in most self-organizing companies are agreements or social contracts. Lisa, if we want to start looking at slides. There's also the project management component of this, which we're not going to dig into, which is kind of, mapping accountability on breaking this down into Trello or Asana or another project management tool. But right now we're going to go high level, looking at accountability and commitments in the form of social contracts. And I'm wondering if anyone's ever used a social contract before in a team. Any hands up for social contracts? No. Or agreements. So Claudel, good. Eva, yes. So we'll start off by talking about social contracts, which is basically, if you don't have like a contract with the person who's kind of your superior, there is no enforcement or coercion or use of force to make sure that something is done, particularly like punishment or that might be like, if you don't meet your KPI, this is the process, like you get taken through this kind of measure. In a self-organizing team, we purposely don't have those kinds of forms of coercion and control, but we do, as is becoming very clear, we do need to align to each other. We do really need to make a commitment and stick to it, and we call these things social contracts. So if you want to just skip the slide, Lisa, I just did a little rearrange. Yeah. So basically, when a new team is forming, I think it is fundamental that you make a social contract between each other and make that social contract live. And basically, this is the way that you can have a founding document or something that you all agree to, a foundational kind of text, or it could be actually, we've seen people do social contracts as videos as well, or social contracts as something that they make, but it's saying we actually have pulled out the way that we want to be together. And this is quite generic, the one that we're showing on the screen. This is from a team that came together to do the public version of Leadwise, this course, which is a little bit different. And after a lot of discussion, it's kind of like, you can have anything on your social contract, really, but how do you bring forth the values that are really, really, really important for how you want to be together? And so the process for this, we'll leave up to you. We're not going to tell you how to do a social contract. Part of self-organizing is figuring that out. I think if it was me, I would use a lot of participatory processes, even a 1, 2, 4 all, to dig into some of these questions a little bit more. But basically, we're asking, like, how do you want to align to each other? How do you want to be held to account? How does your team want to honor what it thinks is valuable and want to honor what it thinks is, the best practice or the best behavior? So a social contract is kind of, it's a contract that you make. Often this is very explicit. There are all kinds of implicit social contracts that we make all of the time that don't get recorded and hung up on the wall. But it's kind of just like a social contract between me and my colleague is that we always have lunch together on like Tuesdays and Thursdays. We haven't like written that down and like put it on the wall. It's just kind of something that we've surfaced in our relationship, and now it is a contract that we don't break, even though it's very implicit. However, as a tool and as a process for teams starting this journey of self-organization, agreements and social contracts are fundamental. So when people cross the agreement or the social contract, you can say, hey, let's just bring this out again. We agreed to this. And so that leads to the part about how do you keep your social contract living. It's all very well to like make this a beautiful kind of nice feeling commitment to each other and then let people cross the boundary. And that is the work of everyone in the team to make it alive. And if people continually crossing it, what is the conflict resolution process? So if you want to just skip to the agreement slide, Lisa. So this is a team social contract that we're showing you on the screen. This is, I must have moved those slides around. Basically at Inspire, we have what are ecosystem social contracts that we have, that we call agreements. So to be part of our community as an entrepreneur in our ecosystem, as a business owner, you have to agree. There's 9 agreements that are our ecosystem agreements. And it's very clear how you change the agreements. And it's very clear that if you're going to be part of our community, you're signing up for these. And we have a diversity agreement, we have a decision agreement, we have a decision agreement around how we treat the businesses within our ecosystem, how they pay a fee to the core. I can actually, if it's relevant, I'll share you the link so you can go have a look at all of those agreements. So these are, they're not team agreements, they're social contracts, they're ecosystem agreements about how we're going to be in a self-organizing ecosystem together. And we also have a code of conduct. If people are regularly crossing our agreements, for instance, the harassment and abuse policy agreement, then we will escalate that to a process. And wanting to go back to social contracts, Lisa, if you have anything to add there, and then we can move into the CLO.
I don't really have anything to add to social contracts other than they can be, as Kate said, sort of implicit, explicit. You can also have sort of agreements with each other about things like, can we have an agreement that, like to support each other with personal development? Like, can we have an agreement that when you catch me talking too much on a call, because I have a tendency to do that, can we have a code word that you say to me in the chat that can help me kind of catch myself in that and do something else? Or, you know, if you have a dynamic or a conflict going on with someone, you can create agreements around, like, can we have an agreement that we flag when we've ended up in something again, and then we can talk about it or something. So there's lots of different kinds of agreements in social contracts, and they're really fun once you start to get into them. And it's a way of like taking responsibility for something. Like if something's not working, it's a good way of being like, okay, should we create an agreement about this? What should that be? And how shall we capture that and keep that alive?
Absolutely. If we stop sharing for a minute, we'll just make time for some questions. Just so we're going to ask you in a minute we're going to put you into your teams for SO101, and you're going to be with these teams for your journey, apart from one time where we purposely switch you so you meet other people. But don't worry about that. We've thought about it. So you're going to be in teams, and we're going to ask you to make a social contract for how you are together in this journey, and how you show up, and how you commit to shipping. So this training is, it's a lot about discussion. It's a lot about finding out what's going on in other people's worlds. It's a lot about learning some micro tools and processes and different frameworks, but it's also about creating and prototyping and experimenting. And with that, so we are asking you to like produce things, particularly that prototyping week, and to get together to complete assignments. And a major part of that is we're asking you to make commitments to each other in your teams and to us as coaches that are holding space for you here and now. Before we do that, Lisa, I just wanted to reference something. Sorry, I'm going to ask if there's any questions coming up, and then we'll jump to the clue. Any questions on social contracts or agreements? And that was a very, very quick look. We are aware.
They don't have to be legal documents, right? They're social.
Yeah, no, they don't have to be legal. Although, you know, that's a lot of this is stemming from that notion, like we bind people with legality to action often, but we can also do that without, you know, in a social way. So we make an agreement to and commit to each other, and there may be no like hard line enforcement mechanism, but actually we find that the bond between humans is often enough. And if you're operating in a way that isn't enough, then there's a serious problem with the trust and the communication in your team. And it happens all the time. Lisa? Did you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, it's amazing the things that we can call into being through language, right? Like announcing that someone is man and wife, or you know, all of those sorts of things. And it's a way of creating a shared understanding of things. Sometimes we make assumptions that, oh, what I think of as respect or trust is the same as what you think of as respect and trust. And it's funny when you actually ask the question, you realize, oh, we all have very different ideas of what that is. So sometimes agreements are a really good way, especially working with diverse teams, of just getting a shared understanding of something. Like trust in our team means this. And so, yeah, that kind of language thing helps create an intentional future instead of a kind of future from a blind spot, if you like.
Absolutely. And this is where this differs from a code of conduct. So a code of conduct is often something that has been created for you to abide by. And if you break the code of conduct, then you enter into a process. But that's like it's not a living thing that's co-created. And that's a key thing about when you create agreements. And you saw in the slide around in Spiral's agreements that if you want to change the agreement, here's the link. Go and do it. And that's super important about this way of operating in a self-organizing system. My personal opinion is that we need to be agents and we need to co-create, and we're not here to consume something that someone else has made for us. It's like an anti-consumer culture where we create it together. And so the creation of the social contract or the agreement is as important as the agreement itself. As Lisa said, it's delving into what we mean, what is respect for me and what is respect for you. That's where we uncover the kinds of like things we need to know about each other. So is there some questions, any other things coming through, or any comments on this? Have you used, I think Claudel, I think you said you'd used a social contract before, or anyone else? What are we thinking so far?
I never used a social contract before, but I clearly see, of course, the value to use it, above all in a self-organization and decentralized organization. But just, can we have some directions or some guidelines to think this social contract or like a framework or something like that? Because, for example, on my side, I just think about my pain point is the meetings. So, for example, the proposition I can have will be around organization of the meetings, and be sure we will have some next steps and objective for each meeting, blah, blah, blah. So what kind of framework you can share with us?
So you mean like a framework for how to make a social contract, or a framework of like, yeah, okay, that's
just because on my side maybe I just focus on one point, but maybe there is many possibilities. So maybe we will figure it out during the case. I don't know.
I think you're right there. I think you can trust yourself, and also know you've already kind of answered your own question, which is that you're really interested in meetings and like making sure that they're like really good with good outputs and good action points. And you're aware that that's the thing that you're holding quite strongly, and that you're aware that other people aren't necessarily. So you've already identified that that's your piece of this puzzle. And so I would ask you to think about what's a process that you could use, or if you really want help, I can come back to you in the chat or later on with a process to make sure you're getting the opinions of other people. But as you speak, you already have like some solutions. So I would ask you to knit them together. And now we can, I think, Lisa, we will just go into the team rooms and get them to start thinking about after I hear from you, Amanda, no problem. But to start actioning this, and then we'll make time to come back and talk about the clue and the other assignment in 35 minutes, and it's all possible. And yes, Christelle, no problem. Maybe we'll just get you to hang on in the chat with us, with Lisa and I in the Zoom room, so we can just update you on everything while the others go into their teams and start working. But first, Amanda.
I was going to say, everyone on this call has been a part of a social contract when they were in school at some point in time. Your teacher gave you the classroom rules, and those are the rules that you behaved in those classrooms. So if you think about high school or college, when you went to different teachers in different rooms, some teachers said, oh yeah, you can eat in my room, and other teachers said, no, you're not bringing any food in my room, I don't want ants. So it's as simple as that. And I guess when I was a teacher, I tried to create social contracts with my students that enabled them to feel like they had a voice in my room. And so I would, talk about framework, I think it's going to come back to making sure everyone in the contract has a voice, especially it's something that I love about consensus. So I'd love to just drop that idea before we all jump off into groups.
So maybe that's the piece of the puzzle you're holding in the contract you're part of, is everyone has a voice. And yeah, I just want to say that's great. And you brought up a really good point, which is around, I think it's really important to make the social contract super explicit for a while, so we can just start getting into the practice of, okay, so that you don't want children eating in your room, Amanda, like making that explicit. I mean, the other teacher, sorry. Because we often rely too much on implicit social contracts. So let's just maybe this is an ask for all of you as you go through this training, to like think about when you're making implicit social contracts with your family, your friends, like your colleagues, and then make them explicit. But yeah, Lisa's putting in another great example. So let's jump into our teams, Lisa, and we'll just jump to the slide where we articulate what we're asking you to do. Sorry to make you like jump in and out so often, my friend, with your non-shared screen. Here it goes. So this team assignment for this week is to create a social contract within your team. Your team is, you'll find out soon. It sets out how you want to be held to account as a team within SO101 mistake. So some things to consider, and we've already heard a few new points, which is how are you going to commit? So the time agreement, we're saying it's about 5 or 6 hours, I think, based on how people showed up in the last cohort. We've like taken a bit of content out just because people at Consensus seem to be like the busiest people in the world, and I'm like, are you just sitting in calls? Do you need to cut something? Anyway, so how you show up together, and that can mean anything. Shipping assignments and prototypes, which is super important. I think it's almost like this is a really great opportunity to learn some stuff and to do some work that will benefit other people. So shipping assignments and prototypes is part of that. Managing all those beautiful things that I'm sure all of you face every day in your life at Consensus, which is managing time zones and meetings and other. So as you operate as a team, how are you going to get around people's schedules and other overlapping meetings, and also coming to the trainings every Monday and Friday. And that's where Lisa and I would like to ask you to commit a little bit somehow to us as well, because we are like fully here with you to support you on this journey, and we'd like you to really commit. But you can say no. And being a great team, whatever that means. So those are just some things to think about. And we also heard from Amanda around like another point is like hearing all voices, or whatever you want to add in. So figure out as a team how you're going to come up with a social contract. And as I said, you can be super creative. We have video social contracts of people in different time zones all around the world doing performance art. I might share that in the Slack with you after. A performance art reinterpretation of their social contract, which one of them includes a woman all wrapped up in plastic. And it's just weird and it's amazing. And that's really important too, is how will you make this alive? Yeah, we can all like make a Google Doc and say, yep, okay, line item 1, 2, 3. I mean, we can also make something that is super vibrant and alive with our energy and our presence that captures some of the different things that we bring to a team and the different skills that we have. So that's the team assignment for this week, and we'll get you to go into your teams and talk about it, how you might begin this work for 15 minutes. Unless it's not very long, so you will have to figure out how to organize to ship back and present to us on Friday. And then we're going to have a little bit of time at the end to talk about a couple of other things. Any questions just on clarity around the team assignment?
How much time do you have for it?
You have 15 minutes to talk about, this is not where you do the work, this is where you figure out how to do the work, basically.
Okay.
And then, Christelle, we'll just chat to you a little bit and then put you into your team if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Cool. Great. Lisa?
Can I just say a quick word about, so we've put you into teams and we're experimenting with this cohort of having you in the same team for the whole course. And we've tried to match you in time zones that are sort of as friendly as possible. But part of your personal responsibility and accountability is that if you discover that the whole of your team is away one week or unable to meet with you, then we'll leave it up to you to sort of take responsibility for flagging that up in Slack or whatever and saying, like, can I join another team please for this week or something. So be in dialogue with us and each other if the teams, if you're having challenges with that. So make sure you take responsibility for your kind of learning process. And also, to your question, Dunia, there are a couple of templates or inspiration points in the pre-week and week one reading for social contracts and like a colleague letter of understanding and things like that. So if it's helpful to have some templates or guidelines to help get you going, then there's some in there. Yeah. So yeah, shall I put them into the breakout rooms then? Let's do it. Breakout rooms. Okay. And Christelle will have a chat with you. So room's open now.
See you in 15, everyone. Have fun. Because sometimes it is a bit violent. Like, cool. So hopefully that has instigated some more great conversation and that you'll be meeting each other very soon to continue the work on social contracts. A note to, is it Team Mandela? Great name. That Ashoka is in your team as well, so it'll be up to you to figure out how to work with him. We're going to be moving into, who is not muted? I think it's Dunia.
Oh, sorry.
No problem, it happens. And also Itam. I would mute you myself, but I'm actually not the host. So the team assignments, I'm hoping are pretty clear. And we're just going to quickly talk about the individual assignment for this week, which is called the immunity to change map. So immunity to change is a theory that has been brought up by some, what would you call them? Behavioral or development theorists, Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy. And it's kind of looking into how we as individuals have an immunity to changing. And that this is actually often like a thing that we build into ourselves because change is actually quite hard. And the habitual behaviors and mindsets are kind of like, there's a whole reason that they exist, but that we can actually change them. So like, for instance, if you know that you personally are facing burnout and that you want to be better at like help enabling your team members to take bits of work off you or share the work or ask for help or ask for what you need, but actually, so you're aware of it, but then you continue your habit of just taking control and like, wanting to sweep up any little bits and pieces and feeling very responsible for the whole team. So there must be a reason for that, right? So perhaps deep down, you're actually very afraid that if you don't do the continual sweeping up and like take on all of the work more and more and more, even though you're aware that you're facing burnout, what is the reason that's beneath that? So this is, if we start to inquire deeper into why we do certain things, we might be getting like closer to the actual rationale. And then the example I just brought forward is perhaps that you're deeply afraid of chaos or not being in control. So there's always like another layer for why we do certain things, and the immunity to change is a way just to start interrogating some of those things. So what we're going to ask you to do, and I can send you a link that details this theory in much more detail. So the individual assignment for this week is to fill this out by Friday. That's all. The link I'm putting through now. And we'll figure out where is best to share this. I think we may come up with a better place than the Google Drive, but for now, just fill it out in your own time, and really think about some of the questions that are coming up in that map. And that's all. So you'll figure out when you look at the map, and I'll share the article, which there has a lot of information in there, what this is about. And we will be circling back to this in week 5, but also on Friday we'll be talking about what came up for you all and filling this out. Is there any questions on that?
Yeah. So this is Trace. I've been posting in the chat, and I apologize for just being a little slow to figure out where these slides are. But I keep asking for the slides, and I get a link to Google Sites that is titled Self-Organization Guidebook, and that I can't find the slides on there. I was looking for specifically the Google slides from today.
Yeah, that's not the slides. You're right. So the slides, we'll put that in a second, just so you have them. And I'm also going to put in, oh yeah, there we go. And is that's got open access, Lisa? Or at least for comments? Yeah.
Yeah, it should do.
Is that meeting your needs, Trace?
Yeah, that's perfect. And the other thing I wanted to ask was if there's, for these, the social contract team exercise, if it's appropriate to review examples of what that's meant for other people. There was one example on slide 16 that was that. And it looks pretty great. But I'd be curious if there are a whole bunch of other examples that we can draw from, so that we're not inventing it from scratch, or if you'd prefer that we not do that because you want us to think about it.
I mean, I have my preference, that's for sure. I'm hearing your need for more examples, so maybe we'll meet somewhere in the middle, and I'll share one awesome video that I mentioned earlier about a video version of the social contract. And yeah, is that enough? And maybe one other visual one in the Slack.
I'm sensing your preference that we come up with it. So
no, I mean, we'll meet halfway. I'll share the cool video, no problem. Okay. Thank you for asking.
That works for me.
And we're going to move into a 4-minute checkout process. And I saw your hand, Dunia. Do you have a question? Or is that just a...
No.
Okay, cool. So I'm hoping we're all clear. And if there are other questions coming up about individual assignments or the team assignment, let's ask them in the chat. Oh, I don't think we're going to have time for that. The one that we talked about, Lisa, because it's a bit more discursive. So I'll change the checkout question on the spot to an old favorite, something a bit silly, which is to check out. Can you just tell us what your spirit animal is, please? And mine is the gray wolf, which is, likes running alone out by itself in the wild, but also knows that it needs to come back to the pack. And we're going to pass the baton to Alexander.
You've already picked my spirit animal on the spot. Oh man, that's tough. I think it's a tiger, but probably because I have 2 cats and I think they're kind of like tigers. And, but yeah, I always like tigers and the way they are in packs and families.
Nice. And if you can nominate the next person.
Kiba.
I feel like someone's actually going to appreciate the first time that I say this, because my spirit animal is a kia, which is this bird in New Zealand, and it's just amazing, and I've had some really cool experiences with it personally. So yeah, it's a kia. Do you have to pick someone? Yeah. Itam.
Okay. Yeah, my favorite animal is elephant. I just love the way they move, the way they protect each other as a family, and the big ears, fluffy ears. Okay, Crystal.
Hi, thank you. That I was saying like, oh, that's so cute, like everyone's choices. I guess for me, I would say like a lioness. That's kind of how I just feel. Obviously, I'm a mom as well, so I kind of feel very protective, very kind of nurturing. Yeah, and I like to be around, I guess, a pack as well. So I feel that that's mostly my spirit animal. And next I will go for Amanda.
I was also going to say elephant, but for actually different reasons. I love they can follow that course and they work together to solve problems. I don't know if you've ever seen like a whole pack come together to help their young, and I just think that elephants are great. And one day I'm going to fly to Thailand and stay at an elephant resort, and that's a goal. That's a total pipe dream goal. So yeah.
Who are you nominating?
Who is left in here? Junia, sorry.
Hey, so I think I have to prepare this question because it's not the first time that we're asking this question. So maybe I will tell a bee because very interesting, you know. You can say animal, I don't know. Yes, insect animal. Because engage in the earth and how it solve you know, the life of all the value chain, all the chain of humanity. So yes, maybe interesting, and it's nice. It produces honey, and we all love honey, right? So yes, I would say that a bee.
Thank you. Who are you nominating?
Eva.
I'm a polar bear. I go from iceberg to iceberg, and ice caps are melting. That's it. Samsel?
I promise you, I was just about to say polar bear. No particular reason other than it's my favorite animal.
Cool. Who hasn't been?
Trace.
I'm up. My spirit animal would be my dog named Kino, who is a Shiba Inu. So he's a Doge. He has that look, and he's like super cute and great, you know, companion. You know, lays at my feet. You know, whenever I'm working, he'll just put his head on my feet very quietly, and he dreams and barks, and it's super cute. And I also like the fox story from The Little Prince. He looks like a fox.
Beautiful. Lisa?
Yeah, my spirit animal is a meerkat because I'm social and playful. I just like the spirit.
Is that everyone?
Yeah, panda for me.
Yeah.
For the colors and the cuteness and the fluffiness, it's just awesome.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm glad we finished on that slightly, yeah, I wouldn't say silly. I'd say like very nice note. And really nice to, oh, yeah, sorry, Samsel.
Just saying bye.
Okay, we will see you on Friday. This was super fun. If things are coming up, put them in the Slack and we'll share a couple more resources. And yeah, looking forward to what we create together.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.